story. One for you and one for him.
I was pretty large when I came back, actually. So, in order to perform and to be energetic,
you gotta get that weight off.
Get the weight off. Well, I've been at it a few years, so.
Do you want me to freeze?
No. Oh boy, this is very nice.
You want some sugar or?
That kind, yes. Yes,
this
of course.
kind or the make-believe kind? That kind.
Better late than never. Good to see you, Leo.
Bless you. Missed that.
No, we got it all. Not really. I got it.
Hey, Black Blonde, good to see you.
I'm a little slow today. You gotta bear with me.
Peace.
I'm gonna be one of those.
Much respect, Mike Jr.
Yeah. My husband
hey,
said that.
That's very hard, Pat.
Really weird hours.
Yeah.
Round 3, that's right.
My husband
Nephew.
told me what he said
Let's
was a
get it in.
lost joke.
Shalom,
Alex,
Demar.
see if you get this joke. Joe said this is a lost joke. Oh.
Thumbs up, Captain Khan. Appreciate you.
See, she got it. I didn't get it.
Hey,
see, that's why
Crystal
you
Jordan.
got it. That's right. Half and half.
Well, let's get to it.
Half the joke.
Let's get to it.
How you fix
We were having fish today, and the guy who cooked the fish, today, he took me over to meet the bartender, at the restaurant. So he busted the bartender. He says, "This is Marv And Jan." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." So the cook who I did an autograph for told me, he said, "You know what this guy said? He didn't know." He said, "Because all you guys look alike." So they all. So he said, "No, we're all just a little happy family." That's what I can understand. That it's funny.
That's wonderful. We are ready.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
I thought that was Orientals. No. Must be us too, huh?
Yeah.
I love it.
Sexual healing.
I'll slide under the table here.
At the very mention of the song.
At the top of the show, yes.
Sexual healing, a huge, giant, enormous hit. Are you surprised? Are you surprised that one is the...
I am very surprised. Are we on the air now?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta cut that sort of thing out.
Yeah, I'll start again. Yeah, I'll take it again.
No, it's all right. I'm very surprised, and sort of not surprised. I'm a person, Pat, who is rather strong-willed. I guess I'm strong-willed. I'm an artist, basically. I like to think of myself that way, and I don't like to think of being a commercialist totally.
But
of course, being...
All right, now we've got everybody in the house. 3 minutes in, we've waited. Good to see everybody in attendance. Good to see you, Sister Fanuvi. Great to see you. Yeah, Sister Vanette. He doing the Tina Turner, ain't he? Tina Turner sound just as crazy. Well, I'm just trying. Yes, I'm trying to tell you. Just you country be country. All right, let's go. She from Nutbush, Tennessee. She act like she come from Wales or something. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Madonna do it too. They go over there for a little while and get to feeling important. It makes you sound more important. All right, let's go. Uh-oh. All right, let's go. Let's do it. War. Huh. That's the name of the chapter. War. Says, avoid war at all cost. Do anything to protect my children and myself from the fallout of a romance turned rancid. Stay away from any encounter with a man seething with anger. You sure didn't read this? Okay. I'm sorry. When Marvin called me, though, I didn't hear his anger. I felt his hunger for reconciliation. To resist reconciliation was to risk a chance to finally make things right. I need to go back to him, I told my mother. Don't, said Mom. He's playing you. Let go. I couldn't. I had to hold on to hope. I had to see Marvin again and allow visitations with our children. Once we agreed to visitations, Marvin showed up in Hermosa at a time when I wasn't home. Yeah, we did read this. Yeah, we did read this. Yep, sure did. All right. That's right. Okay, next one. Past war. Right? Okay, good. We're moving on up. Hey, we're moving on up. All right, escalation. This one is called escalation. Yeah, I remember it now. Okay, escalation. Not much left. Here we go. Right on. Right on. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so yes. This is where we are. Escalation. Okay, yeah, that's when he came and got Frankie. That's when he came and got Frankie and left Nona. That was that chapter. Okay, so here we go. Escalation. In the album eventually titled In Our Lifetime, Marvin wrote a song he called Love Me Now or Love Me Later. We must have read this too. I'm looking at this now. Okay. Yeah, we read this one too. We moving. Yep, okay. We did that one. I'm just double checking here. Yeah, Yeah, okay. Yeah, we did read escalation too. This is when he actually takes the children. So we should be at the pipe, actually. Yep. Oh, the pipe. Yes, that's what it was, the pipe. No, I'm just really discombobulated. So yes, that's what happened. Yes, because I was reading the Daddy Earl voice in escalation. All right, so let's go. All right, the pipe. That's the name of this one. Yes, Lord. I got a bookmark. I just had it in the wrong place. Oh, Lord. Here we go. See? Didn't matter. Still got lost. All right. Ed Townsend introduced me to the pipe. Oh, the pipe. Freebase cocaine. The pipe was addictive beyond imagination. Thank you. That's right. Give me a pass. It's 5:47 in the morning. The pipe destroyed one's life. And now we finna talk about the pipe. The pipe led to utter madness. This time I'm wondering we probably ain't the only ones. Crack cocaine is like no other drug. I think so, Sister Still. He's going to be good and crazy in this chapter. Right on. He said, crack cocaine is like no other drug. It has a life of its own and a dark, dark spirit. It obliterates your senses. You become married to it, and it leaves you with no moral compass. It's true. Once you try it, you forever chase that high. I had an apartment of my own in Reseda, a suburb in the San Fernando Valley outside LA. This was not only the first place I had lived without Marvin since meeting him 7 years earlier. This was the first place I had lived on my own ever. It was just me and Nona. Nona was at daycare. Ed had come to visit. As a housewarming gift, he brought the pipe. gonna burn the house up. Sound like this was not an unusual act. In the drug culture, sharing the newest high was customary. Cooking up this high required a kit with baking soda, a torch, a giant plate, a bottle of rum, and the cocaine itself. Yes, lips looking a little crackish. Okay. Just around the lips. Burt's Bees should make a special blend just for that. For crackish lips. All right, it says, cooking up this high required a kit with baking soda, a torch, a giant plate, a bottle of rum, and the cocaine itself. This is taking forever. Right on. Oh boy, this is taking forever, I said impatiently. I don't need to be bothered. Oh yes you do, said Ed as he prepared to pipe. This high ain't like no high you've ever known. You're gonna love it. Ed was wrong. I didn't love it. I worshipped it. The pipe took over my life, seducing me with a euphoria I had never known before. Every 3 or 4 days, Ed returned to my apartment with a fresh supply. He overcharged me like crazy. I didn't care. Just keep the blank coming. In a monumentally ironic and tragic way, the pipe reconnected me to Marvin, who, while in England, was also freebasing cocaine. During his first high in London, he called me. I'm seeing something I've never seen before, he said. I see myself floating above myself. I look down and see all my selfishness. I see how spoiled I am, how destructive, how I hurt everyone around me. I see how much I need you, Jan. I need you too, I said, but I have to be sure that Bubby is okay. Are you taking care of him? My mother is right here, Marvin assured me. She guards him with her life. He's never been safer, never happier, except for how he misses you. Why don't you fly over here with Pi? Floating on the same high as Marvin, I was ecstatic. This time he means it. This time he is really reconnected to his heart. This time his soul and mind are in perfect alignment. This time nothing can keep us apart. This love is real. This love is right. This love is forever. That's that pipe. A day later, though, when I called him to make plans, he was too effed up to talk. 2 days later, when he called, I was too effed up to talk. Another week passed while our love for the pipe deepened. Have mercy this evening. It says, when we finally did talk, he was enraged because I was asking for money. I had no choice. I was dead broke. Get it from Teddy P, he said. Get it from Frankie B. Get it from all those friends of mine who you've been effing, but don't expect a dime from me. I had no choice but to look cold reality in the face. I needed to work. I got a job answering phones. I got a job as a housekeeper and nanny for a professional single mom. At one point, I couldn't pay my rent and had to turn to my dad Earl. He had a big house in mid-city LA, but instead sent me and Nona to live with his hooker friend I'll call Miss Thing. Okay, that's what it says. Nona and I slept on pallets on the floor of Miss Thing's living room. After a few weeks, Miss Thing threw us out and kept my clothes. Ultimately, all roads led back to Mom's house in Hermosa Beach. I would have liked to declare independence from my mom, but I couldn't. Mom remained the most dependable character in my undependable life. Mom got me drugs. Mom helped care for Nona when I was too high to manage. When Marvin called and learned that I was back with Mom, he was infuriated. He loathed Mom. During these moments, I loathed Marvin. I got satisfaction from letting him know that Nona and I were living with a lady that he despised. The animosity deepened. The addiction deepened. Rick James, himself an addict, appeared as somewhat... Man, now, come on, get out of here. Rick James, himself an addict, appeared as something of a savior. She wanna be saved. He called to invite me back to Maui. Yes, Rick James. I'm Rick James. He called to invite me back to Maui, where he was staying at a posh resort. I flew over, hoping that this, unlike the liaisons with Teddy and Frankie, would prove lasting. The setting was opulent. The seaside suite was palatial. Rick was expansive. At the China Club, it says, Rick was expansive. He talked a mile a minute. He had nothing but praise and admiration for me. I saw that, like Marvin, Rick was brilliant. While Marvin's default mode was mellow, Rick's was manic. But that was okay. It was a sweet manic, a poetic manic. He was interested in politics, religion, art, history. He was a reader, a thinker. He was also a sensualist. But when night fell and we returned to the bedroom, he was a super freak. And we returned to the bedroom, the cocaine he had consumed rendered him impotent. He was embarrassed, but I reassured him. He needed a friend. I did too. At this moment in our journeys, friendship was more important than sex. Girl, if you don't get out of here at your lying tail. God knows that each of us had enough sex to last a lifetime. But you ain't had enough of that crack pipe yet. We fell asleep in each other's arms. We remained close friends and nothing more. And nothing more. And nothing more. I believe it too, Vanette. Weak. Back in Los Angeles, Rick gave me a job in his office. Oh yeah, you can work for Super Freak Enterprises. The idea was that I could write press releases and publicity for his new records. But in the end, only thing this sister ain't been through was the sunken place. Big nephew Drew. Cookie Critter say, once you get her off the streets. Oh boy. Okay. It says she needed a friend. A friend. A friend. A friend with some crack in their pipe. He said he needed a friend. I did too. At this moment in our journeys, Lord, that was the wine. Is forgive me. See, we do it now, cutting up now. At this moment in our journeys, friendship was more important than sex. God knows that each of us had enough sex to last a lifetime. We fell asleep in each other's arms. We remained close friends and nothing more. Nothing more, Vanette. Nothing more. Move on. There's nothing to see here. Back in Los Angeles, Rick James gave me a job in his office. The idea was that I could write press releases and publicity for his new records. But in the end, he basically used me as an errand girl to bring him drugs. I didn't mind because he didn't mind if I skimmed off the top. That's what she said. So it went. A scattered life, living here and there, scuffling for enough money to eat and live. to buy drugs, to stay high on the pipe. Peanut butter and crack sandwich. Y'all stop. Okay, y'all stop. My growing friendship with Rick was a blessing. Dave Chappelle, darn you, started all this. And now you're trapped in a cloning facility, never able to escape again and make us laugh. My growing friendship with Rick was a blessing. I saw the best in him, just as he saw the best in me. Through crack-colored sunglasses. We often talked of quitting drugs, but at least for now, neither of us had the will. Meanwhile, there were reports from London. Marvin's mom had returned to Los Angeles, but had little to say to me, only that Bubby was fine. I missed my son terribly. Kruger had Marvin on tour, but the tour proved disastrous. Like Marvin's former manager, Stephen Hill, Kruger thought he could control Marvin, but the truth was that Marvin was uncontrollable. No one could manage him. He couldn't manage himself. Marvin manipulated Kruger unmercifully. He got him to give him money, get him gigs, and then wound up humiliating him. When Kruger held a press conference, Marvin avoided the reporters by sneaking out through a bathroom window. Marvin, he is out of his gourd. He gonna avoid the reporters by sneaking out through a bathroom window. Have mercy. When Kruger booked a command performance for Princess Margaret, Marvin refused to appear. In a panic, Kruger called me in L.A. to ask me to persuade my husband to take the stage. For the time being, I was back in Marvin's good graces. We'd been having long and loving transatlantic phone conversations. I was the only one he talked to. Side-eye. Kruger told me that if I could persuade Marvin to perform, he'd send me a first-class ticket to England so I could finally see my son. What is going on? I asked Marvin when I got him on the phone. Kruger says the princess is a huge fan of yours. Why won't you sing for her? Because Kruger had me take a 6 a.m. flight from Switzerland to London this morning, he said, claiming that was the only non-stop. Later I learned there was a noon flight that he didn't tell me about. He was afraid I'd sleep through it. So he kept me up all night and drove me to the airport at 5 a.m. You know how I hate getting up in the middle of the night. You know how I hate flying. I will not be played like that. I will not be disrespected. Let him sing for the princess. He's willing to pay you an extra $20,000, I said. He's saying his reputation is on the line. F his reputation and F him. What about the princess? F her. I'm sure she'd like to F you, I said, finally eliciting a laugh out of Marvin. There are many women over here, he said, but they don't understand me like you do, Jan. They can't make me laugh. They can't love me. If you were here, dear, you could make me sing. I'd sing for you, not some silly princess. Look, dear, I said, just be a good boy. Go out there and sing for the royals. Make your manager happy. He's sending me a ticket so we can be together. I'll see you soon. Yes, and put all this foolishness behind us. That's beautiful, dear. I'm getting dressed as we speak. I will sing tonight. Thanks for talking me through this. But by the time Marvin arrived at the concert hall, he was 2 hours late, and the princess, tired of waiting, had already left. Kruger had no reason to send me a ticket to London. In fact, this marked the end of Marvin's relationship with his English manager, Kruger. Motown released In Our Lifetime in January 1981 before Marvin had tweaked his final vocals, and approved the final mix. Yes, the album sounds rushed and a bit incomplete. It's just the fact that it's Marvin Gaye and, you know, he's passed on now that people give it a pass. Because there's some funky music on there, but it's certainly an incomplete album. He was enraged and vowed never to record for Berry Gordy again, and never did. He turned his fury inward and fell deeper into his addiction. And in his fury, he renewed his anger at me. His head was filled with fantasies of me with other men. Our transatlantic calls became bitter and ugly. I responded with a fury of my own. In our verbal battles, I became as nasty as Marvin. I was tired of his broken promises, tired of his BS, tired of a ruinous relationship that brought only pain. I was also tired of myself. I was filled with self-hatred. Only the pipe brought relief. There were men who would bring me drugs. There were men who would praise my beauty and provide me with comfort. They may not have been Marvin Gaye, but they would do. They would have to. And if my drug buddies didn't come through, I turned to Bacardi 151 rum to drown my disgust. Marvin was in London with no plans to return. He had a young Dutch girlfriend named Eugenie. Jeannie. Another? For real, y'all. Eugenie. E-U. Genie. G-E-N-I-E. Jan and Eugene. Jen. When he tired of Eugenie, check it out. What a coincidence. So this just shows that we was on to something all along. Okay? He had a young Dutch girlfriend named Eugenie, who, she said, you got me at Eugenie. Yeah. He's in Europe with a European genie, EU genie. He had a young Dutch girlfriend named Eugenie, who, if the rumors were true, was a groupie he'd met after a show. She was willing to do whatever freakish things he wanted to do. She was entirely submissive. When he tired of Eugenie, there was a 63-year-old English lady, an aristocrat with a great country estate where he spent weekends. I have found my true home here, he told me during one of the calls when we were being civil with each other. I am certain that in a former life I was English. I adore their speech. I adore their style. I adore the way they appear cold and controlled, but underneath they're the freakiest. I could live and die in London. But what about Bubby? Who's taking care of him? He is his father's son. He's pampered by Patsy, his nanny. Round the clock, women are watching him with loving care. You have nothing to worry about. Put him on the phone. Let me talk to him. Let me get him. Mom, said Frankie with a decidedly English accent, is that you? I miss you, Bubby. I love you so much I can't wait till you come home. I miss you too, Mom. Are you okay, son? Yes, Mom, I'm okay. I'm reading my Mr. Men books. Mr. Topsy-Turvy is my favorite. You see, said Marvin back on the phone, everyone is doing fine. But no one was doing fine. Marvin was sick and getting sicker. I was sick and getting sicker. Marvin had no money, no record deal, no willpower. My willpower was less than zero. In the middle of the night, the phone rang. Marvin was calling from somewhere in London. I can't stop thinking about you, he said. Have you been thinking about me? I couldn't lie. Yes, I admitted, all the time. Then it is love, he said. It's always been love, hasn't it? Yes, I repeated. And love will see us through all this garbage, he insisted, won't it? Yes. Are we going to try again? Yes. One more. Reunited. And it feels so good. That's what it says. Reunited. That's the name of this here chapter that I'm about to read starting now. Go. Reunited. The summer of 1981. I was excited, ecstatic even, because Nona and I were packing our bags. We were flying to France to meet Marvin and Bubby, whom we hadn't seen for over a year. That year had been hell. Ain't that right? That year had been hell. Marvin had fallen to new lows, and so had I. Several times he nearly overdosed on drugs. Friends visiting him in London were shocked at his appearance. He was thin. He went off on rants. When he called home, he was sometimes loving, sometimes crazed, sometimes weeping, sometimes laughing, sometimes remorseful, sometimes resentful, sometimes incoherent, sometimes clear as a bell. I mirrored him at every turn. Of course you did, Janice. I mirrored him at every turn. I was just as uneven, just as stoned, just as angry and afraid, just as desperate to stay away, just as desperate to reunite. I had sex only to remind myself that I was still desirable. Marvin had my son. Marvin had my heart. I was still in love with him. He was still in love with me. We spent a fortune on phone calls. Weeks would go by when he would torture me by not allowing Bubby to speak to me. Other times, he would speak of how he could no longer live without me. Moving about Great Britain, he was very covert. He feared, I believe, that I would hire someone to bring my child back to me. But I would never traumatize my son like that. Marvin kept reassuring me that the nanny was taking good care of the kids. Was taking good care of Bubs. The reassurance fell on deaf ears. For most of the time, I was beside myself. I should have sought the help of doctors. I should have sought the help of lawyers, besides the ones who claimed the situation was hopeless. I should have. The should-haves were maddening. My head was high, my heart was heavy, my thinking cloudy. For all the insanity that preceded my trip to France, for all the evidence that argued that reconciliation with Marvin Gaye was not even a remote possibility, I sought reconciliation. Marvin sought reconciliation. We were honestly convinced that this time, for the sake of our souls and for the souls of our children, we would make it work. We chased that idea around the world. It didn't matter that he had bottomed out in England. It didn't matter that he had spent the last month flirting with self-destruction. What mattered was that according to everyone close to Marvin and according to Marvin himself, he was on an upswing. A small-time promoter from Belgium had visited him in London and convinced him to leave England. That man, Freddie Cossart, had brought Marvin to Ostend, a subdued Belgian city of 80,000, and set him up in an apartment overlooking the North Sea. Like Stephen Hill and Jeffrey Kruger before him, Cossart had convinced himself that he could manage Marvin. Marvin had convinced Cossart to give him what he needed most, money and an off-the-beaten-track place to regain his health. Cossart was certain he had Marvin in his back pocket. He held up Marvin like a trophy. In the face of utter confusion, who didn't want to cling to certainty? I was certain that my love for Marvin and his love for me was the only thing that would save us from annihilation. I was certain that once the family was reunited, minds and hearts would be healed. I had heard a change in Marvin's voice ever since we'd moved to Ostend. He had grown close to Cossart, his wife, and their 2 daughters. He had been reminded of the joy of a warm and loving family. Being here in this peaceful community with these peaceful people, he told me, has reminded me how much I need peace. I need the peace of seeing my children play together. The peace that comes with being the one woman I cherish above all others. With being with the one. That's you, dear. That's always been you. I want to believe you, I said. I am believing that God has intervened to send me to a place of healing, Jan. It's a blessing to be away from London and all its pollution. You'll love it here. You'll love the quiet. You'll love the people. You'll love how I've cut out the pipe. You'll see how I've cut down on the other stuff. I'm breathing in fresh air. I'm running on the beach. I'm eating good food. I'm meditating in the morning and praying all the day through. I go to sleep early. I'm in a sound and sane place. Maybe that's because I've left Motown and all the madness. After Motown released in our lifetime prematurely and without his permission, Marvin kept his vow and quit the label. Eventually, he was signed to CBS Records. Sexual Healing is not on Motown Records for this reason. Eventually, he was signed to CBS Records through the efforts of Larkin Arnold. He was now cutting a new record in Belgium. It's taken me a while to figure out what I want to say, he confessed. But I'm determined to do something meaningful. I also want to score big. I want to prove to the world and myself that I'm still capable of making hit records. I understood. It had been nearly 5 years since his last hit got to give it up. His records since then, Here My Dear and In Our Lifetime, had been brilliant but strange. While the critics damned them, the public ignored them. For all of Marvin's philosophical leanings, he remained a competitive artist. He didn't like being cut off the charts for long. It will come back together, Marvin told me. My music, my peace of mind, my family. You'll see all this, dear. You'll feel all this when you come up to Europe. You'll come as soon as this summer tour is over. Marvin's band, led by his brother-in-law, Gordon Banks, had been living in Belgium, working on the new record and rehearsing for a series of gigs around Europe. I later learned that the tour was more dysfunctional than Marvin had led me to believe. Although he had dramatically decreased his drug intake, there were still times when he reverted to his old ways. Coussert forcefully spun the story, the manager forcefully spun the story to the press that under his management, Marvin had forsworn all stimulants and become engaged in a rigorous program of rehabilitation. In interviews, Marvin took this same tack. He convinced himself, just as he convinced me, that he had turned a new page. I needed to turn a new page. I needed to get off drugs. I needed to see my son. I needed to believe that this long separation would soon end. Even though I'd heard these words before, and even though those words had proven misleading, I needed to believe Marvin when he said, "Replace your fears with faith. Have faith that we have weathered the worst of the storm. Be assured that nothing is more important to me than making sure that my son sees his mother and I see my daughter and my wife." Nona and I boarded the long flight to Paris. We were too excited to sleep. We couldn't stop thinking of finally reuniting with Marvin and Frankie. It was Marvin's idea to meet us at Charles de Gaulle Airport and then drive back to Ostend. After clearing customs, we started looking for Marvin and Frankie. They were nowhere to be seen. I started to panic. Had Marvin changed his mind? Is this a trick? Is this whole venture another terrible mistake? Have I fooled myself into believing that things could be different? For 10 minutes, Nona and I wandered around the airport. "Why isn't Daddy here?" asked Nona, crying. "He will be, honey," I said. "He's just a little late." "He's a lot late," Nona insisted. The search continued. I put on a good face, but my panic deepened. Is this another one of Marvin's devious manipulations? Is this another one of his cruel tricks? "It's Daddy!" screamed Nona loud enough for people to stare. Yes, there he was. He was standing at the top of an escalator. Frankie was next to him. Marvin was wearing a white suit and colorful knitted skull cap. His eyes were covered with dark aviator sunglasses. He looked beautiful. With his hands in his pockets, he looked detached. Frankie was jumping up and down. Nona raced up the escalator into her father's arms. I followed and gathered up my son, who in his adorable English accent was screaming, "Mom! Mom!" I was crying. Nona was crying. Marvin's distant demeanor broke down. Now he was crying. Now the four of us were joined together in a huge hug. No one would let go. The warmth was offset by the presence of Freddie Coussart, who was waiting outside the terminal behind the wheel of a blue Mercedes-Benz, the manager. I immediately felt his disapproval. It was only at Marvin's insistence that Nona and I had come to Europe. Coussart feared that we would distract Marvin from work on his new record. Coussart feared that we would lure Marvin back to America. The new manager's agenda was to keep Marvin in Austin and have him operate out of Europe. Coussart drove us into Paris and dropped us at the George V Hotel. We were thrilled to be together at long last. In our suite, we ordered room service. The kids jumped on the bed and we all played hide and seek. That night, Marvin and I made beautiful love. The next day on the drive from Paris to Austin, Coussart said, "Marvin has found peace here in Europe. To maintain his sanity, he must stay in Austin." When it came to Marvin, I felt that Coussart was selfish, much like Stephen Hill had been. He wanted Marvin all for himself. "We're like brothers," said Coussart. "We have adopted him into our family. At this point in his life, he is closer to me than anyone. He knows that my only concern is his welfare." I doubted that. "Freddie likes to trip about masterminding my career," Marvin whispered to me. I let him. Meanwhile, he has provided me with food and shelter in this small city, far from London or Los Angeles. It's cool. You'll like it. I did like Austin. The place possessed a certain elegance. Marvin's apartment on the Strand afforded an expansive view of the North Sea. It was calming to watch the ships sail by. The children were thrilled to be together, and Bubby was thrilled to be with me, Nona thrilled to be with her daddy. The four of us spent that evening together. The feeling was warm and loving. It was a feeling that each of us had been seeking ever since our family was torn apart. "This is the dream I told you about," Marvin said to me. "This is the dream that I swore would come true." That night, Marvin and I made love again. The passion was renewed. So was the sweetness. Body and soul, we were one. The love-making was powerful enough to erase the pain from the past. "I forgive you," said Marvin, holding me in his arms. "Can you ever forgive me?" "I can," I said, kissing Marvin's eyes. "But can you really forgive me?" "Yes," he said. I heard his words, but in my heart, I did not feel that I deserved his forgiveness. The fantasy of a happy family was further fulfilled the next morning over breakfast. That afternoon, we strolled on the promenade. We went to the beach, to the park, to the Chinese restaurant. Nona and Frankie were holding hands. Marvin and I were arm in arm. The city moved along at a satisfyingly slow pace. The air was fresh and clean. The citizenry was fashionably attired. Attractive couples with their pedigree dogs, bikers in professional gear, joggers in flashy outfits. To me, the world felt new. Marvin spoke about biofeedback and the amazing ways that drug-free he'd been able to use his mind to heal his body. I was delighted to hear Marvin talk this way. He'd been reading books on metaphysics. He'd also gone back to scripture. We had endless discussions about Psalm 91 and how God is our ultimate protection. "Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation." Something was happening in Austin, and in the first week that something felt powerful and positive. Then came our second week together. The kids had gone to sleep. Marvin and I, still in chilled-out mode, were looking through a large book of the art of James Ensor, a radical expressionistic painter from Austin, who built a reputation in the first half of the 20th century. Marvin had visited a local museum that featured his work. when he was struck by a self-portrait, reproduced in this book, of Ensor wearing a floral and feathered women's hat. Who does this make you think of? Marvin asked. Your father? I said, trying not to laugh. Marvin scowled. I knew you'd say that. Then why'd you ask me? To test you, to see if you'd jab me. Marvin, let's not start up. I asked you a question and you answered. I have your answer. I don't want to fight, Marvin. Then why did you mention my father? He asked. Because that's who came to mind. It was an honest reaction. And you honestly wanted to manipulate my mood. I wouldn't use the word manipulate, I said. And why not? Stop, I'm not having this fight over a hat and a painting. You wouldn't know anything about hypocrisy, would you, Jan? In the history of our relationship, you've never been hypocritical, have you? Yes, I have, but I don't want to fight. I don't want to be attacked. Now I'm the one who's attacking. That's a joke. This whole thing started with your attack on me and my father. I didn't bother to reply. There was no winning. I stayed silent, hoping Marvin's combative mood would pass. Kiss me, I finally said. He did just that. But as he did, there was a knock on the door. He went to answer. Cool Black, he said to the man standing there. Brother, you are right on time. Jan, come meet my man, Cool Black. For all of Corsair's talk about Marvin being drug-free in Austin, Cool Black was Marvin's drug dealer from London. I watched Cool Black sell Marvin a supply of Temple Ball, opium and hashish. The men mixed it with cocaine, put it in a pipe, and lit up. Marvin took the first hit. Jan, he said as he offered the pipe, you wanted to change the subject. This is the very instrument to effect that change. This will change us in a hurry. Have a puff. I said yes. I accepted the pipe and joined in on the high. The pattern was set. From time to time in the weeks that followed, Marvin and I indulged. It happened at night when the kids were off to sleep. It happened because we both wanted it to happen. It happened because bonding through stimulants had always been essential to our relationship. It happened because the highs allowed us to cover up our conflicts and avoid the bitter fights. It happened until the highs led to even more bitter fights. The bitterest fight of all occurred when, a month or so after arriving in Belgium, Marvin and I took the kids to Paris for a weekend. It was October and the weather had turned crisp. We were walking over a bridge that spans the Seine River on our way to the d'Orsay Museum. Marvin was explaining how this fabulous 19th century train station had been converted into an elegant repository for some of the world's great art. He led us to another strange painting by James Ensor. We had to look at some of these. Called In the Conservatory. In the picture, Ensor showed how musicians and critics were ridiculing Richard Wagner, the German composer whose work they considered too far out. The cat was ahead of his time, said Marvin. Ensor knew Wagner was a genius, but the people around him in this painting think he's full of S. They're too straight to understand Wagner's genius. What you're looking at is a man misunderstood by his own time, in his own time. A man misjudged by his colleagues and scorned by his critics. So what does Ensor have Wagner do in this painting? He has Wagner put his fingers in his ears. Wagner is blocking out everything the detractors have to say. He's ignoring the wrong-headed critics and jealous musicians. Wagner knows he's a genius, so the hell with the rest of the world. If Ensor was still around, he'd put me in that painting. He'd draw me putting my fingers in my ears rather than listen to the people who called here my dear self-indulgent, and in our lifetime, incomprehensible. People are going to love your new album, Daddy, aren't they? Asked Nona. Of course they are, Pi. It's going to be the biggest record ever because I'm bringing back the love. You guys brought the love to me from Los Angeles, and I'm putting it right back into the record. It's going to be nothing but love, love, love. What are you going to call it, Daddy? Maybe nothing but love, love, love. Maybe love from Nona and Frankie and Jan. Maybe just the family of love. While the record was being slowly put together, a theme hadn't yet emerged. Marvin continued to search for a title and overall theme to tie the songs together. Does the record have a story, Daddy? Asked Nona. Of course, Pi. All records have stories. So what is your story about? It's all about Daddy getting better. In spite of the introduction of opium into the mix, Marvin's days were calmer and his nights less frantic. He was devoting time to our children and had even enrolled them in a local school where they wore uniforms and began learning French. He and I were fighting, but in between the verbal battles were frequent, long-lasting love-making sessions. During those moments, past regrets receded, future fears faded, and we were able to embrace the present. Nothing matters but this holy now, Marvin whispered into my ear. In this precious now, we are in perfect harmony. If we stay in the now, we need never be afraid again. In the now, our love is eternal. It was in the now, during a stroll down the Champs-Élysées, when all was peaceful for our handsome family of four, delighted by the sights and sounds of the fall afternoon in the most beautiful city in the world. We walked by the old bookstalls by the Seine. We bought croissants. The kids ate ice cream. Marvin and I sipped strong French press coffee from the Montessori cups, I guess. We stopped in an old school record store that carried an impressive inventory of vintage American jazz. Marvin spotted a long-play vinyl album by Slim Gaillard called Opera en Vogue, featuring cover art by David Stone Martin, the great American illustrator. He showed it to me with pride. Look, kids, he told Nona and Bubby, this is your famous grandfather, Slim. Marvin got the shop owner to put on Slim's records. The scat singing got the kids to dancing and laughing. Back out on the streets, the sun was sinking behind the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which sat alongside the Seine. Marvin stopped to praise the beauty of the amazing architecture. As day turned to night, Marvin was filled with praise. He was in his God space, where there was room for everyone. He spoke of his gratitude for everyone in his life. Everyone has a purpose, he said. Everyone has a gift. Everyone can have a positive influence as long as we are thinking positively. His positive thinking was infectious. The kids had never been happier. I was able to relax again, relieved that Marvin was in good spirits. The mind games had been put to rest, at least for the moment. We re-entered the elegant George V Hotel and were waiting for the elevator to our suite when suddenly a woman came up behind Marvin. She was young, a few years younger than me, and from my perspective, not attractive. You told me you'd call me yesterday, she told Marvin, obviously upset. No, he retorted. I said I'd call you tomorrow. Who is this? I asked Marvin, who didn't answer. Turning to her and looking her dead in the eye, I asked, who are you? She didn't reply. Is this your Dutch girlfriend? I asked, fuming. This is Eugenie, Marvin finally said. Jan, this isn't the time. You kids, take the elevator upstairs, I said. The kids got on the elevator, and Marvin followed. I turned to the woman. Step back, B, I said between my teeth, or I will F you up. Eugenie stepped back. Why are you here? Don't you see this is a family? Marvin asked me to come here, said Eugenie. He also told me to come to Austin next week. I don't care what Marvin said. Just stay away. Just stay the F away from us. When I got back to the suite, I told Marvin that he must be desperate, that his taste was slipping. He said none of this would have happened had we stayed together. I can't go into all that, I said. Not now. I don't want to fight in front of the kids. Just make sure I never see her pasty face again. And the next chapter we will read next week will be The Commotion, for next Saturday's reading. And that's all for tonight. 56 folks liked. 56 folks are watching. 32 folks decided to show that they liked. I appreciate you that did. And if you're able to, slipped your mind, please do so before we get out of here one time. So sorry. All right. So let's go out with some music. Don't want to hear no Marvin music. Don't want no cray to rub off on me before I lay down. Have nightmares. Okay. So glad y'all enjoyed it. Glad you enjoyed it, Andrea. Sister Andrea Daniels. Glad you enjoyed it. Shonda Moe. Glad you enjoyed it. And appreciate you, Brother James. Love you, brother. Peace and blessings to you. Chocolate E. Let's ride. Katina Walker. Said she is not a killer. Y'all is funny. Oh, boy. So, yeah, let's do this. And amen. Yes, God does love you, Sister Estelle. I know that much, but I don't know too much. And he is proud. He is proud of you. He's always proud. He's always glad to see his children growing, getting stronger in him, getting closer to him. I could imagine it's probably nothing more pleasing. But let's look here. Let's see here. Let's see. All right, let's get out of here. Don't let the devil fool you. You ought to know Jesus. Peace and blessings to you, Seventh Ward. Love you, Brother Jonathan. Peace and blessings to you. Good night. Have a blessed rest. Right on. Wednesdays and Saturday nights. Meet us. Much love to you all. Much love to you, Big Nephew Ronell. I appreciate you. Right on. Wednesday night Bible study prayer. Holy Ghost in the air. Wednesday nights. Around 9. CPT time. Saturday nights, we do the Hermetic Theater. Then we do our readings on Saturday nights. Starting at approximately 11:30. You know some funky music.
Jesus said that this is the first and greatest commandment of all. Can you say yes, Lord? Oh, yes, Lord. Yeah, 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 yeah. Say yes, Lord. Oh, yes, Lord.
Our Father funk's the best. Have a blessed rest.
The second commandment is namely this, that thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Jesus said that the second commandment is namely this, that thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Can I get a witness? Holy Ghost witness. Can I get a witness? Holy Ghost witness.
My soul has been set free.
He had made me glad. Can I say it one more time? Said I came to Jesus as I was. I was weary, ooh, so sad. But I found in Him, sweet resting place. Now I know, oh, I know right now. Yes, I know. He has made me glad. One more thing I want to say right here. Said I'm glad. Some grace I sweet the sound. I was lost, but now I'm found. Y'all, but I was blind. Thank God. Now I see. Now I know. Oh, I know right now. Yes, I know. You see the rest like you. But one more thing I want to say right now. Said I love the Lord. He heard my cry. Pity my every wrong. Long as I live, a trouble now I know. Oh, I know right now. Yes, I know. I'll hasten to Him. God's Spirit descending upon me. Now I'm free as a bird in the sky. Holy Ghost came like a mighty rushing wind. Now I got joy in my soul. God's Spirit descending upon me. And now I'm free as a bird in the sky. The Holy Ghost came like a mighty rushing wind. I got joy in my soul. Yes, be trouble, because I am going away to prepare a place for you. I am going away to prepare a place for you. And where I am, you may be too. This is what I want you to do. Just love one another as I've loved you. Listen, I am going away to prepare a place for you. I am going away to prepare a place for you. That where I am, you may be too. And this is what I want you to do. Just love one another as I've loved you. Listen, I am going away to prepare a place for you. I'm going away to prepare a place for you. Listen, and if I go, I shall come again to take you home with me. And your home will be in my Father's house, where there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Let me say this. I would have told you. I would have told you. Listen, that in my Father's house won't be nothing but joy in my Father's house. Father's house. All the days of my life this is what I'm gonna do. Father's house. I'll seek the Lord's face in my Father's house. That's why